The day I walked out of the bank with $9.2 million in my pocket, I didn't call a single soul. Not my sister, not my oldest friend, not even the neighbor who's been borrowing my tools for years. I told myself I had a reason. Not greed, not paranoia. I wanted to know the truth, to see who loved me, and who only loved my money. If you've ever wondered how far betrayal can go, stay with me until the end, because this story will change the way you look at family forever. And if you believe some people deserve payback, you might want to subscribe right now, because this is one of those revenge stories you won't forget. I'm Michael Hayes, 52 years old. Builder of a furniture empire that started in a cold garage with nothing but my hands, a second-hand saw, and a dream. I've been broke, I've been hungry, and every dollar I've ever had was earned with splinters in my skin. But here's the thing about building something from nothing: people forget the nothing part. They only see the something, and they start making plans for it. So when I sold my company last month, I didn't throw a party. I didn't buy a new car. I didn't tell my sister Laura, my college buddy Victor, or my neighbor Shane. Instead, I planted the first seeds of a test that would show me exactly who I could trust. It would start small. A favor here, a request there, just enough to reveal the truth. And I was ready for whatever I found. Or at least I thought I was. My name is Michael Hayes, 52 years old. If you drive down Whitmore Street in Savannah, Georgia, you'll see a 2-story cedar house at the very end, shaded by 3 giant oak trees. That's mine. I built it with the same hands that once bled over second-hand lumber in a freezing garage. I wasn't born into money. My father worked the docks until his back gave out. My mother cleaned houses. At 18, I was sleeping in the back of a beat-up Ford F-150 eating canned beans and dreaming of a workshop with my name on the door. Those dreams turned into Hayes Woodworks. First year, I built 3 tables and sold them at the farmer's market. 10 years later, my furniture was in homes across Georgia and featured in design magazines. But the splinters, the long nights, the busted knuckles, those are the things that stick with you. Success is funny. People forget the years you were broke. They only remember the moment you made it. And when they do, they start making quiet plans for your money, not your friendship. I learned that the hard way. That's why when I sold my company last month, I didn't throw a party. I didn't call my sister Laura. I didn't tell Victor, my old college buddy. I didn't even mention it to Shane, the neighbor who borrows my tools more than he uses his own, because this time, I wanted to see the truth, and I was willing to pay millions to find it. Savannah has a rhythm all its own. Mornings smell like salt and wet earth from the river. Afternoons hum with cicadas, and evenings belong to the sound of neighbors talking on porches, passing stories like they're trading baseball cards. My place sits at the end of Whitmore Street, the kind of spot where folks slow down just to get a longer look. A cedar siding, wraparound porch, and a workshop out back where I've built every piece of furniture in the house. The oaks out front planted the day I signed the papers for the land. They're taller than any of the people I trust now. And trust, that's a shrinking list these days. Laura, my older sister, lives across town. She's got a smile that could sell sunshine, but I've seen how quickly it fades when money comes up. Victor Long met him my freshman year at the University of Georgia. Smart guy, charming, the type who makes a deal sound like a favor. And then there's Shane Porter, my next-door neighbor for 15 years. Friendly enough, but I've noticed he asks more about my bank account than my health. In Savannah, everyone knows your business, or at least they think they do. But they don't know mine, not yet. I'd spent decades building my life here, and in one meeting with a corporate lawyer, I traded my company name for a check with more zeros than I'd ever dreamed of. That's when I decided before anyone got a whiff of my new fortune, I was going to find out who was worth keeping in my life, and who was just hanging around for the payday. The test had to be subtle. You don't catch a fox by announcing the trap. On a Thursday morning, I left a stack of overdue utility bills right in the center of my kitchen table. The red past due stamps were hard to miss. Next to them, I placed an opened letter from the bank, just a generic notice about mortgage options. But it looked urgent enough. I didn't need it to be true, I just needed it to be believable. By noon, the rumor mill had a fresh headline. In Savannah, you can almost hear gossip travel like wind whistling through screen doors. I made sure to leave my workshop door open while I sanded a piece of maple. And that's when I saw Laura's SUV roll into the driveway. She walked in carrying a Tupperware container of peach cobbler. Classic Laura, comfort food first, questions second. How's business? Mikey? She asked, eyes already scanning the bills on the table. I gave a slow shrug, kept my eyes on the wood grain. Slower than it used to be. She set the cobbler down, leaned against the counter. You know, if it gets too much, you could sell part of the property. Market's hot. Or maybe let me handle the mortgage paperwork for you. Just until you're steady again. Her tone was sweet, but the way her gaze lingered on those papers, it wasn't worry I saw. It was calculation. I just nodded, letting the silence hang. The first bait was in the water. Now I wanted to see who else would bite. 2 days later, I decided it was Victor's turn. Victor Long has a way of calling you like it's always good news. Friday afternoon, my phone lit up with his name, and sure enough, his first words were, Mikey. Got a minute, I was just thinking about you. I told him I'd been sorting through some financial headaches and wasn't sure how long I could keep the workshop running. I didn't have to add much color. Victor's the kind of man who paints his own picture if you give him the frame. By evening, he was sitting across from me at the River House, a seafood spot overlooking the Savannah River. He ordered oysters and a bourbon, leaned back like he owned the view. You know, he began, you've got assets. Not just the shop, your design's your brand. If you're in a tight spot, I could help. But we'd need to make it official. I played dumb. Official. He smiled, swirling the bourbon. Partnership. I invest now, get a percentage of future profits. Say, 50%. The number hit like a hammer, but I kept my face calm. 50% for a lifeline I didn't need. That's Victor always turning other people's storms into his own sailing weather. Asterisk. I nodded slowly, letting him believe I was considering it. Inside, I was already writing his name under a mental list marked, Don't Trust. 1 visit from Laura. 1 dinner with Victor. And the picture was getting clearer. By Sunday, I didn't have to call Shane, he came to me. I was out front, tightening a loose board on the porch railing when I saw him stroll over with that easy smile he's been wearing for 15 years. Heard you've been having a rough go, Mikey said, leaning on the fence post like he owned it. I kept my hands busy, voice even. Some bills stacking up, nothing I can't handle. He chuckled low and knowing. Well, you know, I've been thinking. My cousin's looking to invest in property around here. If you ever wanted to cash out quick, I could get him to make an offer real fair, too. In Savannah, real fair is just a polite talk for lowball. I glanced up, catching the glint in his eye. He wasn't worried about me, he was circling the block like a vulture spotting a carcass. Not looking to sell Shane, I said, tightening the last screw. He shrugged, but didn't walk away. Well, if you change your mind, better do it soon. The market shifts fast. I knew what he meant, desperation sells cheap, and in his mind I was on the clock. We stood there a moment, the autumn breeze carrying the scent of oak leaves and river mud. I smiled, but inside I'd already added his name to the same list as Laura and Victor. 3 conversations, 3 confirmations. This wasn't just suspicion anymore, it was fact. By Monday morning, I knew whispers weren't enough. If I wanted the truth, I had to hand them the script and watch how they played it. I called Laura first. Told her I was thinking about shutting down the workshop and liquidating assets to pay off debts. I made my voice sound heavy, like the decision was breaking me. Her reply came quick. "If you're selling, I know a realtor who could push it fast. I'll handle the details for you." Then Victor. I told him I'd found a private buyer for some of my equipment, but wasn't sure if it was a good deal. He offered to evaluate the terms if I gave him full access to the buyer's info. Said he could renegotiate in my favor, but I could hear the deal closing hunger in his voice. Shane was easiest. I mentioned over the fence that a bank rep had called about foreclosure options. His grin widened just enough to confirm everything I suspected. "Mike, I could get you out clean. You'd even walk away with cash in your pocket." It was like dropping crumbs on the ground, each one, leaning closer eyes, brighter voices, just a little too eager. By nightfall, I'd set the trap. I invited all 3 to meet at the workshop on Friday to discuss possibilities. I told them there might be a way to solve my problem and give them a win too. I wanted to see what they'd do when they thought the feast was ready to serve. Friday afternoon, the workshop smelled of cedar and machine oil like it always did. Sunlight poured through the high windows, catching dust motes in the air. I'd set a folding table in the center with 3 chairs, Laura on the left, Victor across from me, Shane to my right. They arrived within minutes of each other. Laura came in first heels, clicking on the concrete, her eyes scanning the place like she was pricing every plank. "Looks different than I remember," she said, running her hand over a mahogany beam. Victor followed, carrying that salesman's smile, while Shane trailed in the last baseball cap, low chewing gum like he had all the time in the world. I kept my tone casual. "Thanks for coming. I've been thinking about ways to get out from under this financial mess, and I think there's a way for all of us to win." That was all it took. Laura leaned forward, pen ready like she'd been waiting for the signal. Victor tapped his fingers on the table, impatient for the pitch. Shane leaned back, arms crossed, but his eyes never left me. The property, the equipment, even the design rights, I continued, could be sold in one package. Whoever steps up first gets priority. The air shifted. They weren't friends or neighbors anymore. They were competitors in a race they didn't even realize I'd designed. And I was about to watch them run. I slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside, 3 separate offer sheets, each with a different number. None of them real, but close enough to smell like opportunity. Laura opened hers first. I'd penciled in a property value far below market price. Her eyes widened, then narrowed like she'd just spotted buried treasure. "I can have my realtor draw papers by Monday," she said, voice steady but foot-tapping under the table. Victor read slower, flipping the page as if weighing pros and cons. "These figures aren't bad," he said, but the way he pressed his thumb against the paper told me he was already doing math in his head, planning margins. Shane didn't even pretend to read. He just glanced at his sheet, smirked, and leaned in. "I can beat whatever they're offering. No middleman, you and me." The room got warmer, not from the autumn sun through the windows, but from the heat of quiet competition. Their eyes flicked between each other, measuring, calculating, ready to outbid or undercut at the first sign of movement. I let the silence stretch until it was taut as wire. "I'll give it some thought," I finally said, collecting the papers back into the envelope. Laura's jaw tightened. Victor shifted in his chair. Shane's gum popped loud in the air. They'd all taken the bait. Now I just needed to watch them fight over it. By Saturday morning, the calls started coming in. Laura was first. Her voice was sugary sweet, but I could hear the steel underneath. Mike, just so you know, Victor's been in some trouble with the IRS. If you sell to him, it could get messy. She slipped in a promise about her realtor waiving fees if I chose her offer. An hour later, Victor rang. Laura's realtor. She's under investigation for fraud, he whispered as if protecting me. Then came the hook. I've got a buyer in Atlanta, ready to close in cash. No questions asked if you let me handle it. By noon, Shane showed up at the workshop unannounced. Leaning against the doorway, he grinned. You don't need those two. I can wire you a deposit today, no paperwork to slow us down. Then he added almost casually, heard Laura's drowning in credit card debt. Victor's, worse half his buyers don't even exist. It was like watching vultures circle, each trying to clip the other's wings before the feast. Every word, every friendly warning was just another shove toward the cliff they all thought I was teetering on. I kept my tone neutral, jotting mental notes. Each lie, each half-truth, each naked attempt to undermine the other's fuel for the fire I was about to set. By sunset, I wasn't just holding their offers. I was holding their leverage against each other. And when the time came, I'd make sure they knew exactly how far they'd fallen. Sunday morning, I drove out past the marshlands to an old boatyard where my friend Hank kept his repair shop. Hank had been my foreman back when the business was still small. Loyal to the bone, no taste for drama. Heard you're selling the workshop, he said, wiping grease from his hands as I stepped inside. The smell of salt and engine oil hit me like an old memory. I smiled. That's the story going around. We sat at his cluttered workbench while I laid it out. Laura's whispers, Victor's half-truths, Shane's quick cash temptations. Hank listened without interrupting, his brow furrowing deeper with each detail. So what's the play? He asked finally. I pulled a thick folder from my jacket. Inside was the real appraisal, 3 times higher than the fake numbers I'd given them, and a set of signed documents transferring the property into a trust I'd set up months ago. The trust, Hank asked, flipping through the pages, owned by a local youth program. I'm donating the workshop, the tools, everything. In my will, the proceeds from any future sale go back to them. I leaned in, voice low. But I'm letting Laura, Victor, and Shane keep fighting over what they think is still mine. Every move they make now digs their own hole. Hank chuckled, shaking his head. You always were a patient son of a gun. I just smiled, picturing their faces when they realized the feast they'd been circling was never theirs to begin with. By midweek, the gloves were off. Laura sent me a confidential email, screenshots of what she claimed were Victor's delinquent tax notices. For your eyes only, she wrote with a winking emoji as if treachery could be cute. Victor, not to be outdone, left a thick envelope at my door. Inside, a background check on Shane, padded with just enough truth to make the lies believable. Drug charges, unpaid debts, a restraining order from someone in Florida. Then Shane showed up again, this time with a man in a suit. My investor, he said, clapping the guy on the back. We're ready to sign today, cash in hand. You just have to tell the other two it's over. I played the part of the cautious seller, nodding, frowning, asking for time to think. What they didn't know was that Hank had been quietly recording every offer, every threat, every smear campaign, each file time-stamped, each voice clear as day. That evening, over coffee in the workshop's dusty office, Hank slid a flash drive across the desk. Everything's here. When you drop the news, you can show them exactly what they've been doing. I imagined the looks on their faces, shock, turning to rage, curdling into the bitter taste of being outplayed. And the best part, the property they'd been tearing each other apart over was already signed away to someone who'd actually deserve it. The trap was set. All that was left was to spring it. Friday evening, I invited Laura, Victor, and Shane to the Rusty Pelican, a waterfront place with a view of the Savannah River. Final decision tonight, I'd told them. Come ready to sign. Laura arrived first in a sharp navy dress, eyes scanning the room like a hawk. Victor followed, carrying a slim briefcase. Shane strolled in last, flashing that too-wide grin, his investor nowhere in sight. We ordered drinks, small talk as brittle as glass. I let the silence stretch, then set Hank's flash drive on the table. Before we proceed, I said, I think you should all hear something. Hank, sitting 2 tables away, gave a small nod before pressing play on his laptop. One by one, their own voices filled the air. Laura's sugar-coated lies about Victor's damning reports on Shane's fabricated investor pitch. The color drained from their faces. Laura's jaw clenched. Victor's grip on his briefcase tightened. Shane leaned back as if distance could save him. You've each spent weeks trying to tear the others down, I said evenly. But here's the thing, the workshop. It's not for sale. It's been in a charitable trust for months. Every word you've said, every lie, every threat recorded and ready to hand over to the right people if you come near me again. Laura sputtered. Victor muttered about lawyers. Shane just stared. None of it mattered. The game was over before they'd even realized they were playing the wrong one. I stood left a few bills for the drinks and walked out into the river breeze, free of them, free of the game, and savoring the quiet burn of victory. The next morning, the Savannah River was calm, the kind of glassy stillness that makes you wonder if the storm had ever happened. I sat on the back porch with my coffee, watching the sunlight crawl across the deck. The workshop keys lay in front of me, soon to be handed over to the youth program that would breathe new life into the place. No more scheming voices. No more poisoned dinners. Just the sound of water lapping against the docks. Hank stopped by with a box of my old tools. Figured you'd want to keep these, he said. I smiled. Not all of them. Some are going with the shop. The kids might get more use out of them than I will now. He nodded, knowing this wasn't just about tools. It was about passing on something worth more than money. I thought about Laura, Victor, Shane. Maybe one day they'd look back and realize this was the day they lost more than a building. They lost their chance to prove they were more than their greed. As for me, I'd found peace in a place I hadn't expected in letting go. And if you've made it this far into my story, you probably understand one thing. Revenge doesn't always mean destroying someone. Sometimes it's simply removing yourself from their reach and leaving them to face the mess they made. If you believe in stories where justice finds its way, stick around. Subscribe, share, and let's keep telling them together. By the time the sun dipped low over the Savannah River, the weight I'd carried for months was gone. The workshop sat quiet, its old brick walls catching the gold light like they'd been waiting for this moment. Inside the benches were clean, the tools sorted, ready for the next set of hands that would shape wood metal and maybe their own future. I locked the door one last time, the click echoing down the empty alley. It wasn't sadness I felt. It was clarity. For so long, Laura, Victor, and Shane had filled every corner of my life with noise. Deals, lies, power plays. Today it was just silence, the kind you can breathe in. As I walked back toward the water, I thought about the look on their faces at the rusty Pelican. Shock, denial, the slow burn of realizing they'd been outmaneuvered by the man they thought was naive. They'd come expecting a prize and left with nothing but the reflection of their own greed. Some people think revenge is about making the other person hurt. But real revenge, the kind that lasts, is making sure they can't touch you again. I'd done that. And the best part, I didn't lose myself in the process. The river breeze picked up, carrying the scent of salt and pine. Tomorrow, the workshop would belong to the youth program. Tonight, it belonged to me, one last time. And in that quiet, I realized sometimes victory isn't loud. It's the peace you feel when you've closed the door on the past and walked away for good. If you've stayed with me until now, you already know this wasn't just about money. It was about truth. About seeing people for who they really are when the masks come off. Laura, Victor, and Shane didn't lose because I tricked them. They lost because greed blinded them. They were so busy reaching for the prize they never noticed the ground crumbling beneath their feet. And maybe that's the real lesson. Revenge doesn't have to be loud, messy, or cruel. Sometimes it's a quiet choice. A door you close, a number you block, a life you take back without giving them a second chance to hurt you. The workshop will live on, just not in their hands. It'll become a place where young people learn to build, to create, to value something more than a quick payday. That's my win. And maybe, just maybe, it's my redemption too. If this story made you stop and think about your own life, about who's really in your corner and who's just waiting for their cut, then you're exactly the kind of person I want to keep talking to. So stick around. Hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. 'Cause I've got more stories, real stories about justice, loyalty, and yes, revenge. And trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. After all, the best revenge stories, they're the ones that leave you smiling long after the final page is turned.